because just for frame of reference, I'm not going to read it, just kind of tell you a little bit about what was going on. John the Baptist gets beheaded. That's Jesus' cousin. He ends up getting beheaded, and in the midst of all that, Jesus feeds the 5,000 right, well, you can't see it obviously, but at the base of this mountain, as a potential site for the feeding of the 5,000 was right down here. And when he finds out and gets news that John the Baptist, his cousin, had died, he comes up on a mountain in a solitary place to pray. That's this. So, first of all, can you imagine a better place to come up and pray than up here?
No.
You know? Everybody has like their favorite spots. You go to the beach or something like that. Sitting out on your balcony overlooking, for some of you, it's Panama City, Destin, or it could be the Caribbean somewhere. But I don't know of any spot that I've ever been that beats this one in terms of a great place to come and to pray and to read your Bible. We're going to give you time to do that in just a few moments. But in the midst of that, right before he does it, he sends the disciples to the other side to go and pray. And for him to come up here and pray, he sends them to go to the other side. Now, when they would do it, Mark referenced this a little bit yesterday whenever we were on the boat. But basically, when you think other side, you usually think all the way clear across the lake. But basically, they would stay about 50 yards offshore, and they would just kind of travel along that direction. Well, when they leave this area after the feeding of the 5,000, they're going back towards Capernaum. You know, the wind tunnel that comes through here, you saw it when we were driving up. As a result of listening to what Jesus told them to do, they end up getting driven out to sea, right? The wind comes through, the storm comes. They did what Jesus told them, and they're now in a fight for their lives as a result. I wonder how many times you've done what Jesus told you to do, and you found yourself in a battle as a result. Here's the thing, and I don't know where this came from, other than just a messed up view of God and Christianity that we tend to have in the West. But a lot of times we think that just because we have opposition, that must mean that we are in opposition to the will of God. That if it's God's will, then everything's going to be smooth sailing. And the truth of the matter is that there can be nothing further from the truth.
Right.
You hear people pray for safety all the time, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, Lord, I pray that you would help us to have a safe flight. I mean, the alternative, Lord, I pray that you would help us to have a horrendous flight. So I do think you should pray for a safe flight. But your life isn't always going to be safe. The will of God isn't safe. I've heard people say this, and I even heard it on about in reference to a trip, a mission trip that we were taking somewhat recently. It wasn't this last Haiti trip, but a different one. And someone said, "You're never safer. The safest place to be is in the center of the will of God." And that sounds amazing. I could put that on Twitter right now and Facebook and have a couple hundred people hit the like button or the retweet button, whatever. But it's not true. The safest place to be is not in the center of the will of God. Stephen was in the center of the will of God and he got stoned to death.
Right.
Jesus was in the center of the will of God and he got crucified.
Right.
The disciples were in the center of the will of God,
Right.
and they were going 50 yards offshore over there towards Capernaum, and they get blown out to sea. Sometimes the fact that you're facing opposition is a sign that you're in the will of God,
Right.
not that you're in opposition to the will of God.
Right.
It doesn't even mean that God is opposing you. Sometimes God knows exactly what's going on in your life, and he also knows exactly what it is that you need. And sometimes he knows that there's more value in being delivered through the storm than there is in being delivered from the storm.
That's exactly right.
And so as a result, he's up here praying and he sees the disciples. They're out there in their boat doing their thing. And he knows they're freaking out. We'd all be freaking out, you know, because sometimes we think, oh man, they were so dumb. I wonder why they were scared. Jesus said they were going to get to the other side. Yeah, that's easy when you're the one up here on the mountain overlooking everything. But when you're in the water and you're paddling but ain't nothing happening and it's pitch black, it's not like there was this much light surrounding. And Jesus knew exactly what it is that was going on. Jesus could see their struggle. And I don't know how you are, but sometimes when I'm in the middle of a struggle, it feels as if nobody sees it. that God can't see the struggle that I'm in, that God doesn't know what I'm going through. I'm like, have you ever prayed a prayer like this? You're like, come on, God, do you not see? I mean, I'm trying to do what you want me to do, and you put me in this situation, and now you don't even care. You ever said that before? I think that like at least probably once a week or so. Now imagine this, and I wish this is a perfect day. I wish the haze was a little bit. It's starting to move though. So I want you to look out there towards the water. There's a boat right there. I think that's a boat. Imagine, it's either a boat or a gigantic cow.
Possibility.
But nonetheless, you never know after yesterday what it may be. But imagine you've got the disciples that are out there in the water trying to stay 50 yards or so offshore. They're making their way towards Capernaum. The storm comes, and now they're moving from where that boat is now out to the middle. And Jesus can see it the whole entire time. They feel abandoned, but yet Jesus can see. He can see every little detail of what's happening. He sees every detail of what was going on. He knew their feelings. He knew their emotions. He knew what they were dealing with. But here's the thing for them and for us. His eye never left them. In your struggle and in your situation, you think about this view right here that we're looking at. It seems like you can see everything from up here. I heard Jimmy, I think he said, I've never seen this far before in my life. This is small compared to the view that God has every day. He can see you when you're out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, in the middle of your greatest storm. He sees you. He knows the inner workings of your soul. He knows the pain that you're dealing with. He knows your struggle. He knows what you're trying to accomplish. He knows what he's trying to accomplish even more so than what you're trying to accomplish. And at any moment, he could come down and rescue you. But when he finally did, and when he finally makes it his way down there to go and to calm the storm and to comfort the people, once he does that, they began to really see that he truly was the Son of God. They may not have ever come to that conclusion had the storm not come. I wonder if God were to answer all of our prayers and we were to never be in the midst of a struggle, if we would ever truly know God for who he really is.
You take him for granted.
Or is safety continuously actually something that would cause us to rely more on ourselves than we would on the one who could save us? And so when you think about it, when God tells you to do something and you do it, and you face opposition as a result of it, sometimes you face opposition directly because of God's command. But when you do, his eye never leaves you. The whole thing is true, that he goes before you, comes behind you, walks beside you, guides your steps. And as a result, when we get it literally is a perspective shifting moment when you're up here on this mountain. But if we can remember that day in and day out, in the midst of the struggles with our kids, in the midst of the struggles with our relationships, in the midst of the struggles with our organizations or the church, or churches that are represented, or our work life, or our health, or whatever, God never leaves you. He sees every detail of your life. And as a result, he goes out there, he meets with them, calms the storm, and now they begin to see that he truly is the Son of God. I'm just grateful to know that no matter what happens, that God was willing, or in this case, Jesus was willing, to go from one of the highest places down to one of the lowest places. I think 700-ish feet below sea level. Is that right? 700 feet below sea level. He went from one of the highest places to the lowest places in order to save them. You think about that from the standpoint of his life. Jesus always went from the highest place to the lowest place. You'll see it over the course of the next several days, and we'll kind of just point it out here and there. But you think about Mount Hermon over there with the snow. You can see it really well now, the transfiguration, all that stuff. He goes down after that to reach the masses. The disciples wanted him to stay up there. Let's stay. Let's make tents. Because it was awesome. Don't we always want to stay on the mountaintops?
Right.
He says if you stay on the mountaintops, you can't go down and reach the people. But again, he had to go from the highest place down to the lowest place in order to make an impact. You think about, he was on top of Mount Zion in the upper room, and from there he goes down to the Garden of Gethsemane. He goes from a high place to a low place. He goes from heaven to earth. He always was going from a high place to a low place in order to reach us. It's interesting. It's not just a heaven and earth thing. It's a symbolic thing. Everything he did was so symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we've got to come down from the high place, my God, in heaven, think about that. From the standpoint of always trying to isolate, Christians always trying to isolate themselves. We want to stay on the high place. We want to build our tent on top of the mountain where we can sit on rocks and sing Kumbaya. But he says, it's great to go up on the mountain as a part of a solitary place in order to pray. But it's in order to prepare you so that you can do the real work down in the valley.
Yeah, that's good.
So Israel, this trip, is one of those high place type moments. When we get back, that's where the real work begins.
Right into the valley.
This should pump you up, not so that you could be on your spiritual high horse. This should pump you up so that when we get back, we can do some damage on behalf of the kingdom of God,
Yeah.
so that we can kick down the gates of the kingdom of Satan. And we're going to do it. But it happens from the strength that you get from moments like this.
Right.
From the
So
high
true.
place to the low place, humbling yourself, being part of a move of God, allowing yourself not to just pray that God keep you safe all the time, but that God would call you out onto the sea, even if you know the storm is coming,
That's good.
and even if he knows the storm is coming, because he will deliver you through it if he calls you to it. So just think about that over the course of the next few moments. And what I'd love to do we have just about 5 or so minutes just to hang out? Just take some moments, and if you want to pray, pray. If you want to read, read. If you want to just look in awe, you know what I mean? Just do that and enjoy the next several moments.